Good morning. My name is Ronald White. I'm an alcoholic. And because of Zoom, I should say good afternoon, good evening, wherever it is that you are. Um, I am so blessed to have a friend like Teresa. Thank you so much, Teresa, for that wonderful introduction and for your friendship over the years. I want to thank Ali for asking me to come and share. Uh, just like you heard Tom say, and I think Amy and Ali, our speaker Ali may have mentioned earlier, Ali just texted us yesterday to remind me about this thing. In fact, 8:30 last night, my time. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm speaking, right? And less people think that Ali is not on the ball. Ali asked me to speak in November of last year. Ali is always on top of everything. And he asked me about this today, 4 months ago, right? And I simply forgot it. I don't write everything down. And thank God that you text me, Ali, because I sure would have been embarrassed and would have missed it. So I appreciate the reminder. And I really want to, I appreciate the people who shared ahead of me. Ali, who's kicked it off with her enthusiasm, and Amy, with everything that I could identify with. And Tom, as far as you're concerned, you took about half of my pitch away, about half my stories. And so, I can't, because it's amazing that we cross so many lines with so many of the same people in terms of the people who influence my recovery. This whole thing, for the love of the big book, the treasure map, this thing that we use in Alcoholics Anonymous is our textbook for recovery. I need to let people know I have a sobriety date. It's July the 14th of 1986. I have a sponsor. His name is Jerome Scott. I have a home group. It's called, and I've got a t-shirt, I'm repping it. It's called the Never Too Early Big Book Workshop. So from the name, you can kind of hear that, I'm all about the big book, right? For the last, since October of 1987, I was a little bit over a year sober. I had a year and a few months. We invited some individuals to sit down in my mother's kitchen and to read this thing called the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous together. And through a series of coincidences, I know in Alcoholics Anonymous, there are no coincidences. Joe Hawk was our Roland Hazard. Joe Hawk had started a group called Big Book by the Sea here in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. And he had been taking some men and women. I didn't know who Joe was, and I didn't know anything about this method of recovery. Back in when I got sober, the closest thing to going through the big book that people were doing at the time was they would have step studies, at different meetings. And at these step studies, somebody would read a little bit from the book about the step, and then people were basically going to general sharing. Not a whole lot about the step or anything like that. They would kind of riff off of it a little bit, but there was no meat and potatoes, as I've come to know is contained in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Nothing wrong with step studies. Anything that gets you in the book, as far as I'm concerned, that can get you started at least reading the book, but that's not enough for me. So we're sitting at a meeting, my brother Ralph and I, and our Strange, Leon M., rest in peace, we called him Strange. He took that from being called a strange alcoholic, somebody who suffered from problems other than alcohol, along with alcohol. And he called himself Strange. And we saw a group that Joe Hawk was taking through the big book. And they were at a marathon meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous here in Los Angeles. And we saw them, two people would get up and they would read from the book. And then they would share their experience on what was just read. And they took it paragraph by paragraph. And it fascinated me the way that they were doing it. And it looked like something, I'm a nerd. I love books. I love reading anyway. I love, and when I say, it's funny how when I say a nerd, I almost still think of it in a derogatory sense for some reason. That's some of the residue of my old thinking. What I am passionate about the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And And, I heard Tom talk about, correcting people, what they call him a thumper, whatever. That's what they called us. They call us those big book thumpers, whatever. Okay, whatever. I love the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And so when we saw these people going through the book, we asked them to, if two of those members, if they would come and take us through the book like Joe was taking them through the book, And I heard Tom talk about this group experience of going through the book. There's power in the group. There's accountability that is created oftentimes when a group with a common purpose is going through this book. And when we sat down in my mother's house, the same place that we got loaded, the same place that we almost broke my mother down, that we almost killed her. And on Sunday mornings, my mother would come out of her bedroom and she would see this room full of alcoholics, not drinking, reading this book called Alcoholics Anonymous. And she would cry out of gratitude for what the program of Alcoholics Anonymous had done for her and her boys. And in November of 1987, there were two guys coming to Los Angeles called Joe McQuaney and Charlie Parmalee. And they were putting on this presentation called The Big Book Comes Alive. And this little band of misfits that were meeting in my mother's kitchen, there was about 12 of them. We took a vote. We said, why don't we, as a group, why don't we take this workshop to go hear these guys share about this book? And when they shared, we had our highlighters and our pens, and we had our books. And man, I need to tell you, my book was full when we left that weekend, because these guys spoke the language of the heart when it came to the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Mm-hmm. And they taught us a lot of different ways of now looking at this book and reading this book that was revolutionary to us. Combining that with the process that Joe had given this man and this woman, Michelle P., a gay heroin addict from New York, and Gary P., this surfer white boy, from I think it was from Hermosa Beach, right? And we some slick guys in South Central LA, right? And they sitting in our kitchen, taking us through this book. And man, when heart speaks, heart hears, right? And when they started taking us through the book Alcoholics Anonymous, man, something happened to me. And I can tell you, my ass was set on fire, right? And they taught us how to read, looking for the similarities rather than the differences, right? Because if I read that book looking for the differences, I'll find them. Bill Wilson, old white boy, stockbroker from New York City, drunk. I'm a smoker from South Central Los Angeles. I didn't even know I was an alcoholic when I first got here. I used so many other substances when I got here, and I was afraid of sharing about those things in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous because our home group was hardcore. I was like, my name is Ronald White. I'm an alcoholic and an addict. And as soon as I said, sit down, motherfucker, they would say, shut up. But thank God they told me to sit down. They didn't tell me to get out west. They told me to sit down. And then they shared enough so that I was able to stay here. But that wasn't just enough, though. Once I got into the book Alcoholics Anonymous, and they opened up the pages, and when they read the doctor's opinion, and in the very first part, when he started talking about how he worked in a hospital that specialized in treating alcoholics, and drug addiction. When I read that, it was like, bam, right? And the big book became relevant for this guy who thought he was simply a drug addict and not an alcoholic. And I was able to stay long enough. And Tom, you're so right. I had people share with me in a manner in which I personalized what was in the book, right? That I was able now to equate my experience. It wasn't a storybook anymore. There were great stories in there, but it was more than that. It was a transmittal of experiences that I was able to relate to my experience. And I said, shoot, Bill drinks like a smoker, right? I said, Bill, well, I heard, I think it was Amy when she quoted that part about the remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning were unforgettable. As I read through the progression of the disease of alcoholism in Bill Wilson, I identified it with my experience. If out of all these people, I got to see 170 people in these squares today. It is, while we are 170 different spirits, it is amazing how connected we are. It is amazing how, just like Tom said, how did they know when they wrote this book that Ronald White was coming in 1986? How did they know that this guy, who had been so repressed when I was young, vowing never to become an alcoholic because my dad was a drunk, drinking at age 17 because I was irritable, restless, and discontented all my life, and I needed ease and comfort. And the things that I fed myself from the outside to fix that were never enough. So when I drank, it was the solution to that problem. And then and I love the book, because the book, when I went to, when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I was really involved in service, and I was a secretary at a meeting. I was a coffee maker. I was the ashtray cleaner. I was the setup guy. I was whatever was done in Alcoholics Anonymous. I needed to do it, right? Because I need to be involved in the action. Funny how I get some time, and sometimes these things that we do in Alcoholics Anonymous, I can start to make it look, that shit ain't important, right? That ain't, that is that really in the, see, I read, there was a chapter 7, chapter called Working with Others, right? Where they outline how I work with the new man or woman. And I share with them the way that I sit down and how I learn things about them. If I read it looking for the differences, I would say that shit ain't relevant now in 2022. We don't do it like that. We don't have everything that is written in that book has relevance for me. Our Sunday morning workshop right now is going through this part of the book, this subset, and we've got like 450 people, right? Sober men and women who gather together, Al-Anons, overeaters, alcoholics, all these folks who come together for the love of the big book. And as we read these things about working with others, and I start learning some things about me, and I start becoming reminded to the fact that I am, with my benevolent ass, right? I am receiving more than the person I am helping in this exercise of one alcoholic talking to another. I start to think there's this certain arrogance that has come over the course of time of us having long-term sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous that makes me start to think that, I'm the teacher, you're the student, just listen to me, do what I do, not what I say, right? All this bullshit, right? And what I forget is, man, I'm an alcoholic, right? And my disease has been arrested one day at a time. Y'all know what it means to be arrested, right? Right? You get those handcuffs, right? You get, put against the wall, you get put in that car, you hope they duck your head, don't bump it, right? Then you're taken down to the station, they print you, they take those nice Vogue photographs, the booking photo, and then they put you in jail, right? And when you're put in jail, this is what they told me. They said, when you're put in jail, Ronald, what is the one thing you want more than anything else? Freedom. My disease was arrested on July the 14th of 1986. And it was very boisterous when I was first put into that cell. I was in a recovery home down on Skid Row here in Los Angeles, and it was rattling the cage and it was doing all that stuff. And man, and I sweated it out, man. And guess what? I hadn't done nary a step then. Yet I was sober. I get, Tom, I'm like you, I get the opportunity. I work in treatment, right? And sometimes I know treatment is different than 12-step work, but it's a good exercise that I get the opportunity to be totally immersed with wet ones, and people who've been around for a while with the various stages. And I get an opportunity to share with people, look, I understand, man, that the arrestment of my disease is contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. And if I let up on taking my spiritual medicine, that's what I learned from the book. If I let up on taking my spiritual medicine and rest on my laurels, step 10, I am headed for trouble if I do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. There's so many things that I've learned from the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and through the process of recovery and of sharing it with other alcoholics like myself, both men and women. I am blessed enough to sponsor a number of women who have enriched my life, a number of men who have enriched my life. I'm glad that I didn't come from a place where they said, and I know where it comes from, but they say, well, the men work with the men and the women work with the women. Well, okay, I've heard is alcoholics work with alcoholics, okay? And so, and so I don't, if a woman asks me to sponsor, I will sponsor, right? I try to not, and I have personal things. I try not to, work with women who are too new, because I understand I'm very handsome, charismatic. Well, and I don't want to deter them from their recovery, right? I just know intuitively I pray and I ask for inspiration on whether or not I should go ahead and become somebody's sponsor, or just be a helpful friend, be somebody that they can speak with, somebody they can talk with. My phone, I'll put my phone number in when we're finished, so I can make sure anybody can call me at any time, because if nothing else, I will have made a good friend. Except I understand that this linking process that we do in Alcoholics Anonymous, that's guided by the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, is so vital for me. I told you guys I've been sober for 35 years. Sometimes I when we do talks like this, I sometimes forget that there are people on here that don't know Ronald White and may wonder, well, who is this, this nerdy looking, guy did he really drink? Did he really do it? Can I relate to him? I think it is always important in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, in a conference or whatever, to briefly tell you just a little bit about me. And I did, I think earlier, share with you, I started drinking when I was 17. I went to college and it was great, but somewhere, and I love reading Bill's story because I like the arc of the drinking career, right? I like the ascension and I like the plummet, and I like the progression of the disease that's outlined in the book. And I like seeing the stories of people like Jim and Fred in the book. I like the history of the book, Alcoholics Anonymous. I like reading about Jimmy Burwell and those atheists and agnostics. I like the stuff that comes behind, why we have God as we understood him, right? I like all the things in Alcoholics Anonymous, I think, that enrich my recovery, and they also propel me into wanting more. Because see, I'm the kind of guy that has an insatiable desire for that which makes me feel good. That's what alcohol did. That's what all the other substances I would. And guess what? Last night, my wife and I went out to dinner. We have date night on Friday nights. It's a direct result of what I learned in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a 30-year marriage. I've had some slips and falls. I put it mildly. You hear that term, slips and falls. I've screwed up in my marriage several times over the course of that 30 years. And I did a 9th step with my wife. I consulted with a woman in Alcoholics Anonymous about how she might want to be approached with such a situation. So I sought counsel. I made this amends to my wife, and as a result of that amends, I made a commitment to her, just as I've made a commitment to you guys, that I will be the husband that I'm supposed to be. And every Friday night is just as if I were secretary of the meeting. I have a date night with my wife. I don't make any other plans on Friday nights. And so we went out with some dear friends to see an old R&B concert of all these groups from the 70s and the 80s, some from the 60s, right? And we're sitting in this arena surrounded by all these people, and I'm hearing the songs that I grew up on, and I'm looking at these guys who are now 70 and 80 years old, still trying to perform, right? And as I looked at this, and as I enjoyed this, I thought about, look at me. The Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous is not, it's not just a book for me. When they talked about the different methods that we've tried to stop drinking in chapter 3, and they said, here are some of the methods we tried, and listed near the end is reading spiritual books. Well, and what reading inspirational books or something like that. Well, if that all I do is read it, that's all the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous is an inspirational book, right? But you guys told me that I'm to do the spiritual actions that are outlined in that book, the program of recovery, the acts against my will, right? And best believe I don't want to be sitting in that park with my wife doing that 9th step, bearing with her my recognition of the ways in which I had harmed her, and honey, how can I make it right? And I'm sitting in a concert next to the love of my life, listening to the music that I've loved so much, right? You're talking about overpay. It's a direct result of the steps outlined in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. The Big Book is not the treasure, but it's the map, right? It's not the treasure, but it is the map. I love the theme of this, right? That you guys have guided me into a program, a way of living, a design for living, the book calls it, that will sustain me through any and everything. I was a practicing attorney for 35 years. I passed the bar when I was 24 years old. I drank away that privilege, drank and used away that privilege. Because even though I started in 79, by 1985, I'm no longer practicing in court. I'm hanging out in dope houses, right? So when I got sober in 86, I was not licensed to practice law because I had stopped paying my bar dues because of my disease. I got that license back 2 years sober, and I practiced having Perry Mason moments in court and doing all this kind of stuff, building a tremendous life. But guess what? 7 years ago, I wanted to commit suicide as a result of representing somebody who had committed a crime, and I didn't watch his activities like I was supposed to. And so I was charged with breach of a fiduciary duty, not charged, but the state bar found that I was in breach of a fiduciary duty, and I lost my license, and I wanted to die because I was embarrassed and ashamed. Thank God for Alcoholics Anonymous. In Bill's story, Bill talks about being in the hospital. See, that's why I love the book. See, the book comes alive for me. And if I don't really experience what we're reading, I won't do what is necessary for me to stay sober. Bill says he lay in the hospital room. He thought of thousands of other alcoholics dying nearby who might want what he had been given so freely. And he said that his friend Ebby who had acquainted him with the Oxford group steps, Ebby had told him that it was imperative that he work with other alcoholics as he had worked with me. Bill wrote, for if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through strenuous work and sacrifice for others, then he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. And if he did not work, he would drink. And if he drank, he would die. And then faith would be dead indeed. And those words rang true for me when I sat in that car in the parking lot of my law office, contemplating suicide. And I don't know which person it was that I might have gone through this book with, which fifth step it was I might have said to my sponsor or listened to from one of my sponsees. I don't know which meeting it was that I had opened the doors for, or which time I'd gone to buy fruit for my workshop, or which time it was that I might have put some kind of spiritual currency in the bank of Alcoholics Anonymous that got me through that dark moment. Because I know it wasn't me. I know what grace is. Grace is unmerited favor. I have had the opportunity. When I was sitting in that recovery home, before I even got in touch with the book, I was able to stay sober by the measure of the ass whooping that I had taken out on that street. And that well-whooped ass propelled me into a state of willingness long enough for you guys to find me and for you to nurse me back to health and for you to get me connected with a book, Alcoholics Anonymous. That is the most miraculous document that I've ever had the opportunity to read. And I've read a lot of stuff. Nothing has touched me as much as the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. All right, so going through the steps as outlined in the book, experience it with you guys, having the opportunity to have the promises, not just the 9th step promises, they're promises replete through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank God. Thank God I didn't have to wait to get to step 9 to have some promises come true. I would have been in trouble, right? But we got some 3rd step promises, right? We got some 4th step promises. We got some negative promises. We got some stuff I'm promised to get if I don't do what I'm supposed to do, right? So it tells me, the book is very instructive for me, for a guy like me. Tell me, okay, Ronald, this is what we did. This is what we got. Here's some of the shit that we did, and we got this also, right? You might not want to do this. And so I read the book with a willing ear and an open heart, and I get fed all the time. All right, so why is this guy who has been through so much, why is this guy who has had the ups and downs, who has had the love of his profession taken away from him, why is he saying this shit still works? Because guess what? I'm sober. That through everything, through all the ups and downs that have taken place in my life, through the roller coaster of my experience, I have not drank. And that is a miracle. And that is a testament to the program of recovery that's found in that book. Because best believe, during that 2-year valley that I was in, it was 2 years of not working after I lost my law license. Most humbling experience, I almost said humiliating. It was humbling. It felt humiliating. It wasn't. I've had much worse. I've had people put their foot in my behind. I've been pistol whooped. I've had guns in my mouth. I've had some things happen to me, y'all. That, are you kidding me? Right? And so I thank God that you guys sat down with me again every Sunday morning and opened the book with me and read to me exactly who I am. I am, by my nature, I am selfish and self-centered. That I find that, I love step 3. It talks about, I'm the problem. The problem was within me. Therefore, the solution is within me. And you told me, quit playing God. This is the how and why of it. It didn't work. And so you took me through all of the rest of the steps that I needed to do. So I've been rambling and going back and forth. Ali, I know I have 5 minutes left, but I want to hear my friend Mildred today, right? And so I would just simply take this opportunity to invite anybody. I'm going to put my phone number in there. I'm going to invite anybody who wants to call me or say hello or talk to me about this book. I'm telling you, man, the treatment center that I work in various things of detox and PHP and IOP. Some people have been in treatment before, so they know what these things mean. But I get the opportunity. I have been given the opportunity to read the big book with these individuals, not to hit them over the head with it, but merely share with them what was freely shared with me. And man, I am overpaid. I need to let you know that. Ali, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity that you gave me. Teresa, thank you so much for the very kind introduction. That's the last thing I'll say. Teresa is somebody I met. A lot of people know who Teresa is because Teresa is one of the most dynamic, intuitive communicators of this program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and she truly lives it. To have an opportunity to have play some small part in that, that's what we get in Alcoholics Anonymous. We give this away, and man, you get to see the ripples. You get to see the ripples, right? You know, and that's what you guys gave me when you opened this book for me. Started with Michelle P. and Gary P. And it went on with Joe McQuaney and Charlie Palmer. And it has continued over the last 35 years for me until I'm sitting here on a Saturday speaking with folks from all over the world. Right, Kuna? Y'all get to see it all the time, right? It's a blessing. Thank God for the big book and Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you for letting me share.